I should have known something was wrong the moment the auctioneer refused to meet my eyes. People don't normally avoid your gaze when you're about to spend your life savings, unless they know something you don't. And as I stood there beneath the blistering Arizona sun, sweat creeping down my spine, I felt that sense of being watched, weighed, measured, and warned. The bankrupt Black Mesa Ranch sat miles off the highway, a stretch of broken fences and wind-gnawed land that locals whispered about but never named outright. Most folks said it wasn't worth the trouble. A few said it wasn't worth the cares. Only one man warned me to walk away. I should have listened. But revenge is a way of blinding a person, especially when the past claws at your throat every time you look in the mirror. The bidding ended fast, too fast. A few raised hands, a clap of the auctioneer's palm, and suddenly the property was mine. I bought a bankrupted ranch at auction, and for a moment, standing there with the keys cutting cold circles into my palm, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It didn't last. The drive out to the ranch was a study in isolation. No phone signal, no other cars, no signs of life except the occasional vulture drifting overhead like it was tracking me. Dust curled behind my truck in a long tail. The sky stretched thin and merciless, and the air tasted like secrets. The road finally widened into a clearing, revealing the main house, 2 stories of weather-warped wood, sagging porch rails, and shutters that hung crooked like broken eyelids. But something about it felt familiar, not in a way that stirred nostalgia. No, this was a kind of familiarity that tightens the heart, the kind that whispers you've been here before, even if you don't remember it. The interior of the house smelled of dust and old storms. Floorboards groaned under my weight, and the dry air seemed to shiver with each step. I took it all in, every crack, every stain, every abandoned artifact of the previous owners, and tried to imagine what kind of people lived here before everything fell apart. In the living room, I found papers scattered across the floor. Bills, foreclosure notices, a torn photograph of a man with sharp eyes and a sheriff's badge pinned crooked on his chest. Something in his expression prickled at me, though I couldn't place why. I pocketed the photo. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying a faint metallic tang. Storm coming, I figured, but when I stepped onto the back porch, the sky was clear. Instead, I saw something half buried near the fence line, a glint like polished steel catching sunlight. I approached cautiously and knelt. It wasn't steel. It was a spent bullet casing. Fresh, still warm. That was when the unease struck me full force. Someone had been here, and not long ago. Maybe they were still nearby, watching, waiting. But for what? A sudden crack echoed across the field, with snapping underweight. I whipped around, scanning the horizon. The ranch seemed empty, but emptiness can lie. My skin prickled with the certainty that I wasn't alone, that someone was studying my movements the way a hunter watches a wounded animal. I considered calling the sheriff, but with no signal and no idea who in this county could be trusted, the thought felt pointless. Still, curiosity tugged at me. What happened here that drove the last owners into bankruptcy? Why had the sheriff department been involved? And most importantly, why did the bullet casing feel like the first breadcrumb in a trail meant specifically for me? I wasn't ready for answers, but they came anyway. I had just stepped back inside the house when the sound hit me, rumbling, low at first, then growing. Engines, many of them. The kind of convoy that doesn't come for friendly visits. My pulse jumped as I moved to the window and peeled back the dusty curtain. Black SUVs, tactical vans, flashing lights slicing through the stillness. Federal agents, at least 20 of them. They fanned out across the property with swift, practice motions, weapons drawn, boots pounding against dry earth. The air filled with orders shouted in clipped commands. My heart hammered as the reality hit me. Hours after I bought the ranch, federal agents were surrounding the property. A battering ram slammed into the front door before I had time to react. The world exploded inward. Splintered wood, flying dust, men in ballistic vests shouting for me to get on the ground. I threw up my hands as knee-jarring force shoved me face down against the floorboards. What the hell is going on? I shouted as plastic zip ties bit into my wrists. Where is it? A voice barked above me. Where's what? Silence followed. Dangerous silence. The kind that says you just asked the wrong question. They hauled me to my feet and dragged me outside. Sunlight stung my eyes. One agent, tall and cold-faced, stepped toward me. His badge caught the light. Federal Crimes Investigations Division. This ranch, he said, is evidence in an ongoing federal investigation. But I bought it legally this morning, at the county auction. He didn't blink, which means someone wanted it out of the system. Who are you working for? Working for? I'm not. Listen, I just wanted. He cut me off. Save it. We both know why you're here. I stared at him, breath catching. I don't even know what you're talking about. He stepped closer, voice low. Then here's a better question. Why would anyone buy the property where Sheriff Dalton was murdered? My blood went cold. Sheriff Dalton, the man in the photograph, murdered. The agents continued swarming the ranch, unearthing evidence, taking photographs, digging through barns and sheds like they were searching for buried treasure, or bodies. I watched helplessly as my belongings were tossed aside, my truck searched, my freedom hanging by a thread I didn't understand. And through it all, one question burned in my mind with blistering intensity, more important than any accusation they hurled at me. What happened on this ranch that someone would kill a sheriff to keep buried? And why did they think I was part of it? The agent's cold stare told me one thing. Whatever this place was hiding, I had just chained myself to it. And someone out there wanted me dead for it. They held me at the ranch for 3 hours before finally deciding I wasn't useful enough to arrest. Useful, meaning I didn't know anything yet. They ran my ID, checked my truck, patted me down twice, and asked the same questions in different orders, expecting one of them to trip me into confessing a crime I'd never heard of. When they released me, it wasn't with an apology. It was with a warning. Agent Marlowe, the tall one with a granite jawline and a voice like steel scraping stone, leaned in so close I could see the cracked skin around his knuckles. You stay on this property, he said, and you're going to get yourself killed. And that's if you're lucky. I stayed back. If someone's trying to kill me, why not tell me what's going on? His jaw tensed. Because you're part of it whether you realize it or not. I'm part of nothing. That's what they all say. Then they were gone. Engines roaring. Dust rising in great choking clouds. SUVs peeling away across the dry earth until nothing remained except the fading echo of sirens and my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. The ranch fell silent again. Too silent. The sun sagged low toward the horizon, bleeding orange across the empty fields. For the first time since arriving, the land felt less abandoned and more stalked. Like someone had been waiting for the feds to leave. I locked the doors even though every hinge rattled like a loose tooth. Then I began searching the house with more purpose. I needed answers, real ones, not cryptic threats from a federal agent who seemed convinced I was some kind of conspirator. I found a dusty toolbox under the kitchen sink, its metal pitted with rust. Behind it, tucked into a crack in the cabinetry, was a folded sheet of paper so brittle it nearly crumbled in my hands. It was a map, hand-drawn, faded, with shaky lines marking the ranch's boundaries. But one thing stood out, a small black X at the far edge of the property. Next to it, in sharp, angry handwriting, were 3 words. Don't let him hide. The message hit me like a fist to the chest. Him. Who? Dalton? His killer? Someone else entirely? And why had the note been hidden? The questions piled on top of each other until they were a weight crushing my lungs from the inside. But instead of fear, what rose in me was something different, something uglier, sharper, familiar. A taste of the old anger, the one I tried to bury years ago, the one tied to my father. I shook it off and forced myself to keep moving. The rest of the house offered little besides dust and decay. But upstairs, in what must have been the sheriff's old office, judging by the bad-shaped imprint on the wall where a plaque once hung, I found something strange. A locked drawer. The desk was battered, one leg splintered, but the drawer itself was heavy, reinforced, almost out of place in such a worn piece of furniture. Whoever installed it wanted to protect whatever was inside. After a few minutes of searching, I found the key tape beneath the desk. Inside the drawer lay a single item, a brown leather notebook. Sheriff Dalton's name was branded into the cover. I opened it carefully. Most of the pages were filled with mundane entries, livestock bills, ranch repairs, meetings with county officials. But then the writing changed. It grew erratic, slanted, rushed. Whole sentences scratched out, pages ripped, and one word repeated again and again, in the margins, in the middle of paragraphs, like Dalton couldn't stop writing it. McAllister. I froze. That was my name. The surge of cold through my veins nearly buckled my knees. I read the entries faster, scanning, flipping pages with shaking fingers. McAllister knows more than he admits. He's getting close. If he finds out who really killed her, they'll kill him too. Protect him at all costs. I stared at the words until they blurred. There was only one her it could refer to. My sister, Anna. She died 10 years ago. Ruled a suicide. Case closed. No investigation. No questions. They said she jumped into the river on a cold January night, her mind slipping in some private darkness none of us saw coming. But I never believed it. Not for a second. Dalton had investigated of the books? Why? And what had he found that got him killed? Anger spiked hot and alive inside me. I gripped the edges of the notebook until my knuckles whitened. Someone murdered my sister. Sheriff Dalton knew. And someone silenced him before he could speak. The door to the office creaked. My head snapped up. Who's there? Only the wind answered, soft, whistling through broken glass. But something had changed in the atmosphere. The hair on my arms lifted. The room felt colder. I stepped into the hallway. The front door, locked minutes ago, now stood ajar, swaying gently like someone had just walked through it. A chill crawled down my spine. I moved slowly, every step deliberate, muscles coiled. Show yourself, I called, voice low. Nothing. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I froze. A boot print, fresh, heavy, marked the dust on the floorboards. Not mine. Not an agent's. Someone who had walked into the house. Someone who had stood there watching, and then left. But why leave the door open? A distraction? The back of my neck prickled. I tore outside just in time to hear the rev of an engine somewhere behind the barn. I sprinted across the yard, dodging debris and rusted equipment. By the time I reached the barn's corner, a motorcycle was already tearing down the Date Road, kicking up a storm of grit behind it. The rider never looked back. But I knew what they had taken. Sheriff Dalton's notebook was gone. I stood there breathing hard, fists clenched, blood buzzing with fury. But mixed into the anger was something else, something that scared me more than the intruders or the feds or even the fact that someone wanted me dead. It was a feeling that I was being pulled into a story that hadn't started with me. A story that had started 10 years ago with Anna's death. A story Dalton died trying to tell. A story someone had murdered to keep buried. And now I was standing at the center of it. As darkness pooled across the ranch and the last traces of the motorcycle's dust faded into the desert air, one question clawed its way to the front of my mind, sharp and relentless. What truth was Sheriff Dalton trying to protect me from, and why had someone decided that now, after all these years, it was my time to die too? Night on the ranch was in silence. It was a heartbeat, a slow, pulsing thrum that traveled through the dry ground and up into the bones of the house. Creaks, pops, the whisper of wind slipping through cracks like a careful intruder. I sat at the kitchen table with every light on, Dalton's empty desk drawers piled around me, and a single undeniable truth burning in my skull. Someone stole the only lead I had on my sister's death, and they did it minutes after the federal agents left, which meant two possibilities. They had been watching me from the moment I arrived, or they had known I was coming long before I ever set foot on the ranch. Neither possibility brought comfort. I forced my mind to slow, to sift through the chaos of the day. There had to be more clues, something the intruder missed. Dalton was paranoid enough to hide his notebook. Maybe he had other things too. The house felt old in the way bones feel old, filled with memory, some of it broken. I moved through each room slowly, letting instinct guide me. Dust coated everything like a film of time. The wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing older, darker layers beneath. Nails stuck out of floorboards at odd angles. And then, something subtle. A hollow sound under my boot. I stopped, shifted my weight. There it was again, a faint, empty knock when the board dipped. A loose plank. Hope sparked. I knelt and dug my fingers into the seam, prying gently until the board lifted free with a groan like a dying breath. Beneath it, Wrapped in an oilcloth stained by decades was a small wooden box. I stayed for a moment, pulse quickening. Dalton had hidden something important here. I lifted the box. It was heavier than it looked, though it smooth from handling. A tiny brass latch kept it closed. When I flicked it open, dust rose like ghostly smoke. Inside were 3 objects: a tarnished silver locket, a black USB drive with no markings, a sealed envelope addressed in careful handwriting, "To the McAllister who comes looking." My throat tightened. The McAllister who comes looking. Dalton had expected me, or someone from my family, to find this. He'd left it for us. For me. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter filled with tight, restrained script. If you're reading this, then they finally got to me. I don't know who you are, brother, cousin, son, but the McAllisters were never meant to be involved in this. Anna wasn't supposed to die. She found something she shouldn't have. Something the county was paying a lot of money to keep quiet. I tried to protect her. I failed. I won't fail you. Trust no law enforcement. Not the sheriff's office. Not the feds. Not even the locals. Half the county is paid off. The other half is scared. If they know you have this box, they'll kill you like they killed her. Find the man with the tattoo of the broken star. He knows the truth. He'll run when you show him the locket, but he won't run fast enough. Sheriff Dalton. My hands trembled by the time I finished reading. Anna hadn't taken her own life. Dalton knew who was behind it. He'd left clues for me to follow, but someone else was trying to erase every trail he left. The locket felt cold in my palm. I opened it. Inside was a photo, grainy, old. A girl standing beside a man whose face was smeared in mud or ash, hard to decipher. But around his neck hung a chain with a distinctive pendant. A broken star. The symbol on the letter. My breath stalled. This man, this shadow figure, he wasn't imaginary. He wasn't a rumor. Anna had found him, photographed him, and, if Dalton's letter was right, paid for it with her life. When I closed the locket, the latch clicked with sharp finality. But the USB drive drew my attention next. Dalton had hidden it with a locket. Whatever was on it was dangerous enough that 2 people were now dead, Anna and the sheriff, and one more person, the mysterious writer, had risked everything to steal Dalton's notebook, which meant they likely didn't know about the USB. But they would. Eventually. I needed to see what was on it. I scoured the house for an old laptop. Nothing. The barn. Nothing. But the small storage shed behind the barn held what I needed, a dusty MacBook with a cracked screen but a working battery. I booted it up inside the kitchen, plugged in the USB, and waited as a computer whirred to life. One folder appeared. Redacted underscore files. My pulse thudded. I clicked. Inside were dozens of documents. And one video. The documents were scans, receipts, land transfer contracts, bank statements, all showing massive payment from a shell corporation to several officials in the county, the sheriff's office, the county commissioners, even members of the fire department. But the biggest payments went to a name that froze my blood, Deputy Sheriff Malcolm Hart. He'd been the first responder at the river when Anna died. He'd been the one to give the official ruling. He'd been the one who told me, eyes filled with false pity, sometimes people just lose their way, son. And all the while, he'd been bought. Bought to lie. Bought to bury evidence. Bought to protect a killer. Anger surged, hot and blinding. But then I clicked the video file. The screen flickered. Grainy footage appeared, Dalton filming himself with a flashlight under his chin. His face was pale, sweaty, eyes darting behind him. He looked terrified. If you're watching this, they're on their way. I found out who's been funding the land grabs. It's bigger than drugs, bigger than money laundering. They are moving something through the desert, something they don't want anyone seeing. Anna found their drop point. She wasn't supposed to. The man with the broken star, he's not the boss. He's just a hound, the one they send to clean up loose ends. If he knows I have this, he'll come for me. And if he kills me, he'll go after anyone connected to me, including whoever finds this video. Don't trust the feds. They are compromised. All of them. Run. If you can't run, fight. The video cut out. Darkness swallowed the screen. I sat there motionless for a long time. The letter, the documents, the video, all of it swirling into a single truth that settled like a stone in my gut. This wasn't just about Anna. This was a network, crime, corruption, something hidden in the desert, something worth killing for. The sound of an engine cut through the night. I snapped upright. Headlights appeared at the far end of the driveway, slow, deliberate, creeping toward the ranch like a predator approaching wounded prey. Someone was coming. Not the feds, not the thief. Someone worse. I grabbed the locket, the letter, the USB, and shoved them into my jacket. The engine grew louder. Closer. I backed toward the back door, heart hammering. Then the headlight shut off, and the night fell silent. My pulse roared in my ears. Whoever was coming wasn't here to talk. They were here to finish what they started 10 years ago. And for the first time, I realized the truth. I wasn't hunting the people who killed my sister. They were hunting me. The headlights vanished, swallowed by the desert black, but the engine still hummed softly, idling at the end of the driveway. Whoever had arrived didn't want to be seen. They wanted me guessing, panicking, making mistakes. It was a hunter's tactic. Slow the prey's breath, fracture his choices, force him to reveal himself. Not tonight. I slipped out the back door into the darkness. The moon was thin, a sharpened silver edge, and the air held a faint scent of rain that would never come. I crouched low, moving quietly along the side of the house until I reached the shadow of the barn. The gravel crunched under my boots, each sound too loud. A car door clicked open. I froze. Another door followed. 2 people. Voices drifted through the night. Quiet, hushed, but not quiet enough. McAllister still inside? Doesn't matter. Get what we came for. Burn the rest. My stomach tightened. Burn. They weren't here for me. Not only. They were here to erase a ranch, wipe away whatever evidence Dalton had tried to leave behind. If they thought Dalton's secrets were still hidden inside the walls, they'd raise the place to ash just to be sure. I pressed against the barn wall, forcing my breathing to steady. I had maybe 60 seconds before they'd start checking doors. There were weapons inside the barn, rusted tools, maybe a crowbar, but nothing that would help against 2 armed professionals. These weren't random thugs. They moved with too much discipline, too much purpose. Military backgrounds, maybe, or private security. All whites, the kind of men who never wrote their names down anywhere. A scuff of dirt to my right made me turn sharply. Movement. Not human. A horse. The old Mustang in the corral lifted its head. It was pricked forward, sensing danger long before I had. Its muscles quivered beneath its dusty coat. Animals always know. I whispered, easy, more for myself than for the horse. The men approached the porch. Boots thudded up the steps. A flashlight beam sliced through the front window. Glass glowed bright for a heartbeat. Clear the first floor. On it. I had no time. I darted toward the fencing, keeping low, and slipped behind the shed where the laptop still sat on the kitchen table inside the house. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee into the desert night and never look back. But that wasn't an option. Not anymore. I had Dalton's letter, Anna's locket, the USB drive containing the truth someone was willing to kill for. Leaving meant losing everything, and I refused to run from my sister's killers. A crash sounded from inside the house as one of them kicked open a door. More footsteps, more muttered communications. I peered around the shed's corner. One man stood guard near the front steps, broad shoulders, dark jacket, the glint of metal holstered at his hip. His face was shadowed. The second man was inside, tearing through the living room. Then I saw it, the faint glow of embers near the man's feet. He'd dropped a flare. They were setting the house on fire. Panic surged, hot and immediate, but it wasn't fear of the flames. It was fear of losing the last fragments of Anna's truth. The house held more secrets. Dalton wouldn't have stopped at a journal and a hidden box. There had to be more. If they burned it, everything else burned with it. The flare hissed, sparks beginning to catch on the dry porch boards. I moved before I could doubt myself. I crept along the shed's edge, keeping to the darkest shadows, and grabbed the first object my hand landed on, a rusted pitchfork leaning against the wall. Not a weapon I wanted, but the only one I had. The guard's attention stayed fixed on the front door while the man inside rummaged loudly. Perfect. I slipped behind the water trough, crouched low, and calculated the distance. 10 yards. Gravel. Open ground. If I made a sound, he'd turn. I waited until the man inside slammed the drawer. The crash masked the scrape of my boots as I lunged forward. 2 yards behind him now. 3. I raised the pitchfork. The guard spun faster than I expected, hand going for his weapon. I didn't hesitate. The blunt end of the pitchfork cracked against his wrist, knocking the pistol to the ground. He grunted in surprise, swinging his arm toward me. His fist clipped my shoulder, pain flaring, but I braced and drove the fork's handle into his ribs. He staggered back. The second man burst through the doorway at the noise. "Drop it," he barked. I could see his eyes clearly now, cold, calculating, utterly emotionless. The kind of eyes trained not to hesitate when squeezing a trigger. I dove sideways as the first shot split the air. The bullet slammed into the water trough, sending a spray of metal shards into the date. The horse panicked, rearing and kicking at the fence. I rolled, gravel tearing at my palms, and sprinted toward the barn as the men opened fire. Shots cracked through the night, each one too close. I dove into the barn, slammed the door behind me, and dragged an old feed bin in front of it. I was trapped, but alive. For now. The barn was dark except for slivers of moonlight leaking through the wooden slats. My breath came fast and ragged. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Tools and equipment cluttered every corner. Old tractors, coils of rope, rusted plows. The scent of hay and diesel clung thickly to the air. I needed a plan. Footsteps approached outside, slow, patient, hunting steps. Then a voice. "You can't hide in there forever, McAllister." My blood turned to ice. They knew my name. I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" A short pause. Then, "Friends of a man you should have left buried." The man with the broken star. Anna's killer. Dalton's warning roared back in my mind. His just a hound, meaning these men were his pack. The barn door shuddered as someone kicked it. The feed bin scraped forward an inch. I scanned the barn desperately for an exit. Then I saw it, a ladder leading to the hayloft. I climbed fast, boots slipping on the rungs. Once in the loft, I crawled toward the back wall. The boards there were loose, warped from weather. I shoved one aside and peered through. Behind the barn lay an old drainage ditch that cut across the property like a scar. Overgrown, hidden by mesquite. If I could reach it, I could disappear into the desert. The door below slammed open. They were inside. I ripped off 2 more boards and widened the opening just enough for me to slide through. The wood splintered, scraping my jacket as I squeezed out and dropped silently onto the dirt below. Voices echoed from inside the barn. "Check the loft." No time. I ran. Branches whipped at my arms. Dirt kicked up behind my boots. My lungs burned. The ditch grew closer. 5 yards. 3. Gunfire exploded behind me. A bullet tore past my ear. I dove into the ditch, rolled to the bottom, and pressed myself against the earth. The roots and weeds created a natural cover. My breath trembled through clenched teeth. Footsteps pounded above. "He went this way. He won't get far." Their voices faded slowly. I stayed still until silence finally wrapped around the ranch again, heavy and suffocating. When I finally lifted my head, the house was burning, flames climbing the porch, licking the edges of the roof. Smoke curled into the night sky like a black warning. They had destroyed everything. Everything except the items inside my jacket. Dalton's letter. Anna's locket. The USB. The truth was still alive. And as I crawled through the ditch toward the safety of darkness, one promise crystallized inside me, clear, sharp, unstoppable. They had tried to kill my sister. They had tried to kill Dalton. They had tried to kill me. Now I would return the favor. The desert at night was unforgiving. Every movement was a gamble, every shadow a potential ambush. My boots sank into the powdery sand as I pressed on, following the drainage ditch until it emptied into a narrow, dry wash line with mesquite and creosote. My chest boned, lungs rasping with every breath, but adrenaline drove me onward. I could not stop, not now, not ever. The items in my jacket weighed heavy against my chest, tangible reminders of why I was still alive. Dalton had trusted me with the truth, and now it was my turn to use it. Whoever the man with the broken star was, he had networks, resources, men willing to kill without question. But he had underestimated one thing: me. I paused to catch my breath, listening. The desert was silent except for the distant howl of a coyote. No headlights. No engines. The men from the ranch were gone. For now. That didn't mean they wouldn't return. They had an obsession that only blood could satisfy. Pulling the locket from my jacket, I examined it under the dim light of the moon. The photo of Anna and the man with the broken star stared back at me. His face was obscured, but the pendant was unmistakable. Dalton's letter had warned me. He'll run when you show him the locket, but he won't run fast enough. The words rang in my head like a bell tolling in a dark cathedral. I had to find him before he found me, or before he destroyed every lead Dalton had left behind. The first step, I realized, was to trace the shell of the operation Dalton had uncovered. The USB drive contained more than just documents. It had a digital trail, payments, contracts, addresses. All of it pointed to one man, Malcolm Hart. Hart, the deputy who had overseen Anna's suicide investigation. The man who had lied to my family, smiled at our grief, and buried my sister under a river of lies. He was the key. If I could get to Hart, maybe I could start unraveling the network he protected, and maybe, just maybe, I could find the broken star behind it all. I needed a base, a place to work where no one could find me. Scanning the map on the USB, I noticed an old hunting cabin tucked just over the ridge, marked as a storage site in one of the scanned receipts. It wasn't luxurious, but it was isolated, and that was enough. I trudged through the desert for hours, guided by moonlight and my determination. Every step was a reminder of Anna's death, every flash of memory a hammer driving me forward. By the time I reached the cabin, my legs ached, my throat was raw, but I was alive. The place was abandoned but solid, with a roof that had weathered decades of storms. Perfect. Inside, I cleared the dust from the table and set up the laptop. The USB drive connected immediately, and I pored over the files. Financial transactions, digital communications, surveillance photos, and cryptic notes littered the folders. Dalton had meticulously documented Hart's movements and connections. Every meeting, every payment, every hidden transfer. It was enough to indict half the county if it reached the right hands. And yet, it was dangerous. I was alone. The men with the broken star had already proven they would burn a house to erase evidence. They would not hesitate to hunt me down if they discovered this place. Hours passed. Dawn bled over the horizon, painting the desert in pale gold and shadow. I had traced several leads to abandoned warehouses and hidden storage lots on the outskirts of town. Nothing too suspicious at first glance, but the files indicated they had been used for moving something or someone. Dalton's handwriting noted the code names he had overheard in intercepted calls. Names like Hawk, Raven, and the one that chilled me to my core, the Collector. It was clear now. Anna hadn't stumbled upon a simple crime. She had found a trafficking operation so deeply embedded in the county's infrastructure that her death had been necessary to keep it secret. And Dalton had died trying to protect the truth. My fists clenched around the locket. I didn't feel fear. I felt rage. Pure, focused, unrelenting. It was time to take the next step. Hart had to pay for his lies. The broken star had to be unmasked. And every man who had touched Anna's life with cruelty had to answer. I packed the essentials, food, water, weapons scavenged from cabin, and set out on the first lead. According to Dalton's notes, a shipment linked to the Broken Star's operation had been scheduled to arrive at a small airstrip 3 hours north. Remote, unmonitored, perfect. I moved cautiously, hugging shadows, using terrain to my advantage. Every mile brought me closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. The desert had a cool way of teaching patience. At times, I had to stop completely, listening for the faintest sounds of pursuit. Each echo of wind through the canyon or rustle in the scrub became a test. When I reached the airstrip, the place was quiet. Too quiet. Old hangars leaned at precarious angles, and weeds choked the cracked asphalt. I could see tire tracks in the sand, fresh and deep. They led to a large cargo container at the edge of the tarmac. Heart hammering, I crouched behind a derelict plane and peered through the shadows. 2 men were unloading boxes, speaking in low, clipped tones. The broken star wasn't there yet, but it was coming. Dalton's warnings had been clear. He will run, but he won't run fast enough. I needed leverage. I needed information. And I needed patience. I slipped closer, careful, studying every movement. My mind replayed the last 10 years, the empty river, the lies, the grief, the promise I had made to myself the day I discovered the truth. I would not rest until every last person responsible for Anna's death paid in full. The first step was simple. I had to know who was moving what and why. The second step would be harder. I had to make sure Hart and the broken star felt the weight of my vengeance before they realized I was coming. And for the first time since I stepped onto Black Mesa Ranch, I understood something essential. This was no longer about survival. This was about revenge. And revenge, I realized, is a predator with patience. I waited, hidden in the shadows, as the men continued their work. Every sound, every movement, every whispered instruction added pieces to the puzzle Dalton had left behind. I had the locket, the letter, the USB drive, and now I had a plan. The desert stretched endlessly, silent and patient, as if it understood what was about to happen. And I understood one thing more than ever. No one who had hurt Anna would walk away unscathed. The sun was sinking behind the northern ridge, painting the sky in bruised purples and feverish reds, the kind of colors that looked like a warning, the kind of colors that told you something had to burn before nightfall. I stood in the middle of Riverside Road, boots dusty, shirt ripped, my body aching from the day's chaos. FBI vehicles had retreated, local sheriff units were scattered, and the ranch, my ranch, was still smoldering on the horizon. Smoke rose in thin spirals, twisting like dying snakes. The cartel convoy was gone, their blood in the dirt proof of what happened. Now only one thing was left. Farron. Some men don't need an introduction. Their evil announces itself long before they speak. Farron was one of those men. He had slipped away during the shootout, leaving his hired killers to buy him time. And now he was somewhere in the dying daylight, closing in on the one thing he still wanted, the documents Natalia grabbed before the barn explosion. The ones proving he'd orchestrated everything, from the mortgage fraud to the trafficking routes buried beneath my land. And in Natalia's trembling hands, they felt heavier than any weapon. "Luke," she whispered, voice shaking as she met my eyes. "He won't stop." "I'm counting on it," I said. She blinked at me, confused, but I wasn't going to explain yet. I needed her to trust me. So far, she had, and tonight, trust was the only currency that mattered. The trap. We waited at the ridge leading down to the ranch's south pasture. Flat, open, just enough cover to make someone think they had the advantage. The wind carried that heavy desert silence that comes only after violence, the kind that warns you more is coming. The headlights cut across the field before we heard the engine, Farron's battered black SUV rolling slow, deliberate. He was alone. Of course he was. A snake doesn't slither into a fight with friends. Natalia's breath hitched as the engine died and Farron stepped out. His suit jacket was torn, dry blood crusted along his sleeve. He had a pistol in one hand and that same superior grin on his face, the one that said he believed he owned everyone in sight, including us. "Told you," he called over the distance, voice echoing eerily. "Everything falls apart without guidance, Luke." "Funny," I shouted back, stepping forward, hand resting lightly near the handle of my father's old revolver. "Seems like you were the one who fell apart." His smile broadened. "You should have taken my offer. We could have built an empire here." "I'm not much for empires," I said. "Just justice." He laughed. "Justice? You still believe in that?" He pointed the gun at Natalia. "Throw me the folder, sweetheart, or I'll paint the dope with you." Natalia looked at me. I gave the slightest nod. She stepped forward slowly, holding the thick folder in both hands like a peace offering. Farron's gaze glinted with greed. "Good girl," he murmured. Then he stepped just a little closer. Just enough. The trigger. Farron never saw the tripwire. The second his boot pressed into the disguised line running across the field, the old ranch windmill, rigged earlier with a pulley and counterweight, swung down its rust-eaten blade like an executioner's axe. Pharaon dove sideways at the last second, avoiding being cleaved in half, but the blade sliced across his shoulder, sending him tumbling into the dirt with a howl. "You son of a—" He fired wildly. Natalia and I dropped behind the limestone boulders as bullets sparked off the rocks. "You want revenge?" I shouted. "Come and take it." Pharaon was furious now. Furious men make mistakes. He charged forward, firing again, blinded by rage, unable to tell that I wasn't hiding behind the boulders anymore. While he aimed at shadows, I circled left through a depression in the ground, moving silently, carefully. My boots barely touched the dirt. My heart hammered loud in my ears. I approached him from behind. This was the moment I'd wanted since I first set foot on this cursed property. But when I raised my revolver, something unexpected froze me. Pharaon had dropped to one knee, clutching the bloody gash on his arm, and for the first time, he looked small, mortal, like the monster Mars had finally cracked. Not that it mattered. He looked up and saw me. His eyes widened. "You won't shoot," he rasped. "You're not like me." He was wrong. The confrontation. I lowered the revolver, not because I wasn't going to shoot, but because I wanted him to understand something first. "You think I bought the ranch by accident?" I said quietly. He frowned. I continued. "You think I didn't know what the auction was hiding? The foreclosure was staged. Crooked paperwork. A straw buyer. Someone wanted the property erased. Someone like you." Pharaon's breathing hitched. "Why do you think I bid?" I said, "Why do you think I stayed after the FBI showed up? After the gunfight? After everything?" I leaned closer. "Because you ruined my father. You forced him to sell this land. You laundered money through his name. You bled him dry. And when he fought back, you buried him under accusations he couldn't outrun." Pharaon's face twisted, recognition dawning. He whispered. "You're David's boy." I nodded. "And this land was always meant to come back to us." Pharaon's eyes narrowed with animal panic. He reached for his weapon. Natalia stepped forward from behind, gun in hand. "Don't," she warned. Pharaon froze. For the first time all night, he looked truly afraid. He lifted both hands slowly. "Luke, listen. I can offer you—" "No more deals," I said. I fired. The bullet struck clean, dropping him instantly. No suffering. No theatrics. Just an ending. Ashes and sunrise. The wind picked up, whispering through the burned remains of the ranch. The world felt strangely quiet after the gunfire, like the earth itself was catching its breath. Natalia walked to my side, relief softening the hard edges of the day. "It's done," she said. "Yeah," I answered. "But this isn't over." She looked at me, puzzled. "We have the documents," I explained. Pharaon's operation wasn't just local. These files connect him to judges, bankers, the entire network that let this happen. "So what happens now?" I stared at the horizon, the ranch silhouetted against the coming night. "We rebuild," I said. "But first, we expose everyone who tried to destroy my family. We make sure Pharaon's death isn't the ending." I holstered my revolver. "It's a spark." Natalia smiled, fierce and determined. "Then let's burn the rest of his empire to the ground." And as the sun vanished and the first stars flickered into existence, I realized something. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was justice. Real, unstoppable justice. And it had only just begun.